Ethan Cole had learned early in life that machines were simpler than people. Engines broke for a reason. Parts wore down. Problems could be traced, diagnosed, and fixed with patience and honesty. People, on the other hand, were unpredictable, driven by pride, money, fear, and power. That was why Ethan preferred the quiet hum of an engine over conversation. It never lied to him. The garage smelled of oil and metal, the familiar scent clinging to his clothes no matter how many times he washed them. Harris Auto and Motors had been his second home for 6 years. He arrived before sunrise every morning, rolled up the steel doors himself, and left long after the sun dipped behind the warehouses across the street. He didn't complain. He didn't argue. He just worked. His boss, Greg Harris, liked Ethan because he was efficient, not because he was kind. Greg believed a shop survived on speed and profit. "We're not here to save the world," he liked to say. "We're here to make money." Ethan never responded to those comments. He didn't need to. He knew where he stood. That Tuesday afternoon, the shop was unusually quiet. A few cars sat waiting for diagnostics, the radio hummed softly, and Ethan was replacing brake pads when he noticed someone standing hesitantly near the open garage door. She looked out of place. The woman was elderly, perhaps in her late 70s, wearing a light gray coat despite the warm weather. Her hair was silver, pulled back neatly, and her posture was slightly bent but dignified. Beside her stood an old bicycle, rusted frame, cracked seat, chain hanging loose like it had given up. She cleared her throat softly. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't know if this is the right place." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and smiled. "How can I help you, ma'am?" She gestured to the bike. It stopped working halfway down the road. "I don't drive anymore, and this is how I get around." Ethan walked over, crouched down, and inspected the chain. It had slipped and bent the derailleur slightly. "A simple fix, no problem," he said. "Give me a few minutes." Her face lit up with relief. "Oh, thank you." From inside the glass office, Greg Harris noticed immediately. His eyes narrowed. "What's that?" he muttered, standing up. Ethan worked quietly, loosening the chain, realigning it with practiced hands. He grabbed a spare brake pad from his personal toolbox and replaced the worn one, inflating the tires carefully. The old woman watched him the entire time, her eyes thoughtful. "You're very kind," she said. Ethan shrugged. "Just doing my job." After 15 minutes, he rolled the bike forward. "Try it now." She climbed on carefully, pedaled once, then twice. The bike moved smoothly. "Oh," she laughed softly. "It hasn't felt this good in years." She reached into her purse, pulling out a small wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Ethan shook his head. "Nothing. It's fine." Her hand froze mid-air. "Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am." Her eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what this means to me." Before Ethan could respond, Greg stormed out of the office. "What is going on here?" Greg barked. "I fixed her bike," Ethan said calmly. Greg scoffed. "This isn't a bike shop." She needed help. "She needs to leave," Greg snapped. "Now." The woman looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry," Ethan turned to Greg. "I used my own parts. I didn't stop any work." Greg's face hardened. "You don't make decisions here." The garage fell silent. "Pack your things," Greg said. "You're done." Ethan stared at him. "You're firing me?" "For wasting company time." The old woman gasped. "This is my fault." "No," Ethan said gently. He took off his gloves, hung them on the peg, and removed his jacket. Greg crossed his arms. "You think you're some hero? You're replaceable." Ethan nodded once. "Maybe." He picked up his lunchbox and walked out without another word. The old woman watched him go, her heart heavy. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small house, unaware that his simple act of kindness had just set something far bigger into motion, and by morning, everything would change. Ethan barely slept that night. Losing a job always came with a strange mix of fear and relief, fear of bills and uncertainty, relief from not having to answer to someone who measured worth only in money. He lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked slowly above him, replaying the moment Greg told him he was fired. The anger hadn't come. It never did. What lingered instead was a quiet sadness for a place he had given years of his life to, only to be reminded how easily kindness could be punished. Across town, the old woman sat in a very different house, large, quiet, and guarded. The bicycle leaned carefully against a polished stone wall in the garage, freshly fixed, chain shining under bright lights. Lillian Brooks stood beside it for a long moment, her hand resting lightly on the handlebar. The bike was not valuable. It had never been. But it represented something she had tried to preserve after her husband died. Independence. Her driver, Marcus, approached respectfully. "You're home safely, Mrs. Brooks." "Yes," she said softly. "Thanks to him." Marcus hesitated. "I asked around. The mechanic who helped you, he was fired." Lillian turned sharply. "For what?" "For fixing your bike." Silence followed. The kind of silence that carried weight. Lillian Brooks had spent most of her life learning when to speak and when to listen. As the widow of Henry Brooks, founder of one of the largest medical logistics companies in the region, she understood power, how it could be abused and how it could be used to protect. Since Henry's passing, she had taken a step back from the public, letting others assume she was simply a fragile old woman with fading influence. "They were wrong." "That young man didn't ask who I was," she said slowly. "Didn't charge me. Didn't hesitate." Marcus nodded. "People like that are rare." Lillian's gaze hardened with resolve. "Find him." The next morning, Ethan was awakened by a sound that didn't belong in his quiet street. A deep, synchronized rumble shook the windows. He sat up, heart racing, and pulled the curtain aside. Black SUVs. 1. 2. 3.7 in total, lined perfectly along the curb like a private security detail. Men in dark suits stood calmly beside them, scanning the area. Ethan's first thought was panic. His second was confusion that he stepped outside cautiously, wearing yesterday's clothes. One of the men approached. "Mr. Ethan Cole?" "Yes," Ethan replied, voice tight. "Mrs. Lillian Brooks would like to speak with you." Before Ethan could respond, the door of the center SUV opened. Lillian stepped out, standing taller than he remembered, her expression warm but firm. "Good morning, Ethan," she said. He blinked. "Mrs. Brooks?" She smiled. "I didn't lie to you yesterday. I am an old woman who needed her bike fixed. I just didn't tell you the rest." Neighbors had begun to gather, whispering, filming discreetly. "I heard what happened," Lillian continued. "And I want you to know, what you did mattered." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't expect anything." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm here." She gestured to the SUV. "Come with me. Please." Against his better judgment, and driven by curiosity, Ethan agreed. They drove to a part of the city Ethan had never seen up close: glass towers, guarded entrances, quiet authority in every detail. The building they entered bore a discreet sign, Brooks Medical Logistics. Inside, people stopped when Lillian passed. Some nodded respectfully. Others straightened instantly. Ethan swallowed hard. In a private conference room overlooking the city, Lillian spoke openly. "My husband built this company believing service came before profit. After he passed, I watched as people slowly forgot that lesson." She looked at Ethan. "Yesterday, you reminded me." She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a job offer. Not just any job, director of fleet maintenance, overseeing hundreds of vehicles used to transport medicine and medical supplies across the region. Ethan's hands trembled. "This can't be real." "It is," she said simply. "You fix things. Machines. People. Systems. And you do it without asking what you'll get in return." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Why me?" "Because you didn't see an old woman," she replied. "You saw a human being. At that exact moment, across town, Greg Harris stared out the window of his office as two black SUVs pulled into his parking lot. His phone rang. "Mr. Harris," a calm voice said. "This is Brooks Medical Logistics. We're terminating all contracts with your business. Effective immediately." Greg's face drained of color. "What?" he stammered. "Why?" "Because character matters." The line went dead. Greg sat back slowly, realizing that the mechanic he'd fired wasn't replaceable after all. Back in the tower, Ethan stood by the window, city stretching endlessly before him. All he had done was fix a bike, and somehow, that had changed everything. Ethan didn't accept the job immediately. That surprised Lillian Brooks. Most people would have said yes without a second thought, dazzled by the salary, the title, the building that touched the sky. Ethan asked for time, not to negotiate, not to doubt her sincerity, but to understand what accepting would truly mean. He had spent his life earning his place with his hands, and he wasn't ready to abandon that identity without reflection. "I've never managed people at this level," he admitted as they sat in the quiet conference room. "I don't wear suits. I don't speak in boardrooms." Lillian smiled gently. "Leadership isn't about suits or titles. It's about values. You already have those." She gave him the day to think. Ethan returned home in silence, his mind heavy with possibilities. He called his mother, who lived 2 states away, and told her everything. She listened quietly, then laughed softly. "You always fixed broken things," she said. "I'm just glad someone finally noticed." That night, Ethan stood in his garage, surrounded by tools he'd collected over years of honest work. He realized something important: this opportunity wasn't pulling him away from who he was. It was asking him to become more of it. The next morning, he called Lillian. "I'll do it," he said. "But only if I can build a team the right way." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say," she replied. Within weeks, Ethan transformed the fleet maintenance division. He hired overlooked mechanics, trained apprentices from underfunded neighborhoods, and set policies that rewarded integrity, not shortcuts. Vehicles ran better. Costs dropped. Morale soared. People worked harder when they felt respected. And then there was Greg Harris. With Brooks Medical Logistics gone, Harris Auto and Motors struggled. Bills piled up. Customers noticed the change. Greg blamed everyone but himself, until one evening, he saw Ethan's name in a news article praising innovative leadership and community impact. The realization hit him harder than any loss of revenue. Months later, Greg stood nervously in the lobby of Brooks Medical Logistics, waiting for a meeting he'd requested but never expected to receive. When Ethan entered the room, wearing a simple suit and the same calm expression, Greg lowered his eyes. "I made a mistake," Greg said quietly. "I judged you wrong." Ethan didn't smile. He didn't gloat. "We all get tested," he replied. "Some of us pass. Some of us learn." Ethan offered Greg a list of community repair programs his company now sponsored: free clinics, bike repairs, basic vehicle safety checks for seniors. "You want redemption?" Ethan said. "Start there." Greg nodded, ashamed but grateful. As for Lillian Brooks, she returned to her quiet routines: board meetings, philanthropy, and yes, riding her bicycle to the pharmacy whenever she felt like it. Ethan insisted on maintaining it himself. One afternoon, as she pedaled past the old garage where it had all begun, she smiled to herself. A single act of kindness had revealed the truth about many people: about a boss who valued profit over humanity, about a mechanic who valued humanity over profit, and about the quiet power of doing the right thing, especially when no one is watching, because in the end, it wasn't the black SUVs that mattered. It was the bike. It was the choice, and it was the man who fixed it.